Everybody, welcome back to the NC State Insider Podcast. I'm your host and lead beat writer, Tucker Sennett, joining you here today to discuss NC State's status in the ACC and how the ACC as a whole is going to help NC State the rest of the season should the Wolfpack continue to find ways to win games. NC State obviously coming off another clean sweep of the road, beating number 18 Clemson and knocking off Pitt in Pittsburgh yesterday, Saturday. So a nice win for the Wolfpack there. Overall, NC State is 5-2 in conference play with losses to Virginia and then that disappointing loss to Georgia Tech last Saturday. So, two losses for the Wolfpack so far in conference play has them doing fairly well in the ACC from a standing standpoint. The Wolfpack is hanging around the top. They're currently in third with a 7-2 conference record. So a excuse me, not 7-2. That's the women's team. The men's team is 5-2. I don't know why when I pulled up the standings, the women's came up, but throw that out the window. The women also are doing quite well in the ACC, but we're here to talk about the men's team today. NC State is trailing a perfect 7-0 Duke, a 7-1 Clemson team, although NC State has that win in its pocket over the Tigers. Virginia suffered a loss to North Carolina yesterday, so they are now 5-2, and then Miami is 5-2. So the Wolfpack is firmly in that top five mix right now. They're tied technically with Miami and Virginia, although Virginia currently has the head-to-head advantage, and then NC State will have a chance to face Miami later in the season. But we're not here to really talk about NC State's strength as a team in terms of resume. We're here to talk about the ACC's strength and what that might mean for NC State. Just for reference, so we get a feeling of where NC State is in the picture here. NC State is fifth in the conference in net ranking or net rating and fourth in the conference according to KenPom. So, squarely, once again, just like the standings in that top five. The ACC as a whole, and this was a big thing that goes back to Commissioner Jim Phillips at ACC tip-off. You can go back and read some of my content from there when I saw him speak. But it goes back to what he was saying in that, the goal this season was to improve the strength of the conference as a whole. And, outside of a few teams at the bottom, there's like kind of a bottom tier of 4 or 5 teams. The ACC has been very competitive. These teams in the middle of the pack have beaten some of the best teams in the conference. Cal and Stanford teams that have been, really, really interesting and getting big wins over teams that are visiting the Bay Area. So you have that advantage. Then you have an SMU team that seems to pull rabbits out of its hat constantly. You have a Virginia Tech team that has some serious talent on the roster. It's just a matter of, getting it to mix every night. And then Louisville is a team that could surge up the standings here now that they're starting to find some health again. So yeah, I would say top to bottom, the ACC is massively improved, and the metrics agree. And the ACC currently ranks fourth as a conference according to KenPom and fourth according to the net. So what does that mean? Currently, the ACC is trailing the SEC, Big 12, and Big 10. This means that the ACC has jumped the Big East. What you do have to take into account is that the ACC does have 18 teams, so that makes things a little bit janky because there's so many games every week and so many teams in action. As of now, and the ACC is projected to have 8 tournament teams according to the net. That is the second most, tied with the Big 12, behind the SEC and Big 10 with 10 teams. So That bodes well for NC State. Why do I say that? Because, the more bids, including that automatic bid that the ACC can produce, the more likely it is that NC State makes the tournament, as well as the likelihood that NC State is able to overcome mistakes down the stretch increases. Does NC State hope to make any mistakes? Absolutely not. But there's always chances of that. And there are some landmines for the Wolfpack the rest of the way. That Syracuse game at home on Tuesday has dropped from a quad 2 to a quad 3, so that's going to be another quad 3 game for NC State. And the Wolfpack hasn't won 3 games in a row since December. So that'll be, we'll see if they can pull that off. Certainly not a ideal situation in that sense, just with the lack of consistency. But NC State's going to need to find a way to dig deep here and get that done, to continue to not only represent itself well from a resume standpoint, but represent the conference well. Um, as for the conference, the top of the conference, you got Duke, you got Virginia, you got Louisville. North Carolina has a slight edge in the net right now. I think primarily, almost entirely because of their record in quad one games. They have 4 quad one wins, while NC State has just one. However, North Carolina has some slip ups, but they've benefited from the fact that Cal law or the 2 losses in California, because those were on the road, have bumped up to quadrant one. Things can change in the next couple of weeks. We'll see what happens to Stanford and Cal as they're forced to leave the Bay Area, but they could very well dip in the net rankings depending on how their seasons go. And one of those becomes a quad 2 loss. That would obviously benefit NC State greatly. It would also benefit NC State and the ACC as a whole if some of NC State's early season losses remain quad one. I think they got some major help from Auburn and Texas yesterday. Those 2 teams picked up some nice wins. Seton Hall has dipped a little bit, so that one's dipping into the quad 2 range for the Wolfpack. And then obviously that quad 3 loss to Georgia Tech, who continue to tumble down the net rankings. If the bottom falls out under the ACC, then we might see some problems in terms of that 8-team goal. I think you're pretty safe with. I'm gonna start my speculative bracketology here. Obviously, Duke will be in, Virginia will be in. I would assume, unless there are complete collapses, then you get into a second tier here. Unless there are complete collapses, Louisville will be in, North Carolina will be in, NC State will be in, is my guess. Clemson will be in, SMU should be a tournament team, and finally Miami. Then you have another tier below those teams of Virginia Tech, Cal, and Stanford. Stanford's resume is wild, and they could absolutely be a late season landmine for NC State, depending on how the rest of the year goes. But I think those 3 teams will essentially be battling for one spot. There's also a chance that Wake Forest gets things turned around here at some point and finds a way to get it going. They've really struggled with quad 1 games. They're 0-6 in those so far this season. Could obviously turn that around with a win over NC State on Saturday. All in all, the conference is doing its part in helping NC State. The bracketology, which we'll have more coverage of as that starts to come out between Lenardi and some of the more serious and accurate bracketologists that do more data-based analysis and have been more accurate in years past. We'll certainly keep an eye on those and try to keep you abreast of where NC State might end up in the NCAA tournament, assuming and this is the baseline, they keep winning basketball games. It's that simple. You just have to win and you're in. That's always been the recipe for making the NCAA tournament, but the ACC is certainly helping the Wolfpack uh, make that process a little bit easier. As always, really appreciate you all tuning in. Feel free to follow us on social media. You can follow me at Senate Tucker on X. You can also follow our website on X at Wolfpack on SI. And of course, throw the YouTube channel a subscription, the sports videos on SI YouTube channel for more episodes of the NC State Insider podcast. We'll see you next time.